Well, Sue, thank you very much again for being willing to join in this project where we're documenting and collecting memories about the Christmas story.
My
Um,
pleasure.
when did you first see the Christmas story? Is it so early that you can't even remember that first production?
I suspect I might have saw it when it was in the parish hall. I don't remember anything. We used to do a lot of shows way back then when we were growing up, but certainly when it came to the church, it was much grander. It's jaw-dropping for a lot of people to see it the first time.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And when I first came to St. John's, I was speaking to Stephen Vale, my predecessor, and, and he said, "Now I got to tell you about the Christmas story." And I said, "Well, I know the Christmas story." He said, "No, no, 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 no." He said, "The Christmas story."
Yeah,
I said, "So it's a pageant?" And he said, "Oh, it's much more than a pageant." And yeah, I'll never forget the first time I saw it. I sort of went and getting a sense of the scale and scope of it. The stage going up on top of the choir stalls. When that was first explained to me, I couldn't even frame it in my mind. Now you've been involved with the choir for many years. I wonder if you have a favorite part of the show. Is it a musical moment or is it something that's happening on stage?
I think it's the manger scene just with Joseph and Mary and Jesus and the reading.
Is it John chapter 1?
Was
In the
the
beginning was
Word,
the Word, and the Word
and
was
the
with God,
Word
and the
was
Word.
Yes.
with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was the life, and the life was the light of all people.
Yeah, that really is my favorite because that encapsulates the whole thing right there. And I was thinking last night, now what would it be like without the music?
Certainly, yeah. In many ways, it is a musical production.
It just it pulls the whole thing together.
It really
And
does. And I'm so glad that we've been able to find a way of presenting the Christmas story this year, even though it's not our traditional way. But
totally ingenious. Yeah, just wonderful to be still doing it regardless. It's kind of like thumbing your nose at the pandemic and
literally,
saying, look
yes.
at, we're still doing this. We're still going. You can't stop it. You can't stop the word of God. It's just wonderful to be part of it. So thank you.
Now, well, I'm delighted that you're part of it. In all of the years that you've been part of the Christmas story, uh, I wonder if there are any favorite memories. Perhaps sometimes these are mishaps or things that didn't go quite right.
Oh, yes.
Anything that stands out?
After the scene closed, the lady that was looking after the angels, keeping them all in order, came running down and came to the back of the church where we were singing and told me that Jenny had fallen from the very top of the angel ramp right straight down to the floor. So after we got over the shock and I made sure that she was fine, the tradition now is to say that, she didn't have her wings, so she couldn't fly. So she fell right down the chute, like boing.
Ooh.
And immediately after that, on the Monday, when my dad found out what had happened, he went down and built railings and a foot stop on the edge. The other wonderful memory is when Jenny was Mary and Georgina had a hard time trying to find a Joseph to complement her. So Phil was Joseph that year, which was amazing, absolutely amazing for me, for him to do that. But he did that for Jenny. And
Oh,
because
that's such a special thing for them to
that's
share
not him,
together.
that's definitely not him. I think my other favorite memory is hearing every year the march that is played for the Kings. which somehow evolved with Mr. Koyu, the original organist of our church, almost. And that's wonderful for me, because my dad was a boy chorister in the choir under Mr. Koyu. He dragged him out of Central School because he had a voice and made him come to church. He wasn't Anglican. It's like, you're singing in my choir. So, and actually my mom and dad met in the choir. So, wow, a big tradition there. And that's another one of my favorite memories, is hearing that march played, and he played it.
That moment where everything goes dark and then you get the bum, bum,
And everybody jumps in their
And no matter what, when even though like we've done rehearsals and I've seen it, and I know what's happening, always that first night at least I get a little bit of a boop, there it is. One of the wonderful things about the Christmas story is how it draws people in who may not necessarily be church goers as such. I have the experience all the time when I meet somebody in town, and sometimes I'll be wearing my collar out, when I'm doing my grocery shopping or whatever, and somebody will say, "Oh, what church are you from?" And I'll say St. John's, and they say, "Oh, the Christmas story." And sometimes, quite often, actually, they'll say, "Oh, I was a shepherd," or I was. It really creates that sort of that good feeling, that goodwill that's more than just sort of sentimental kind of Christmas season stuff. I think it really has to do with the gospel.
And it's a tradition for a lot of people.
How marvelous it is to have this tradition at St. John's that draws people together in such a way.
And it's really a privilege to be in it, but as well as to offer it to the community.
Right. Welcome, my friends. It's a great joy to be with John LeCain today. John has been involved in the production of The Christmas Story on many sides for a number of years. When did you first experience The Christmas Story? What was your first experience of it like?
Well, it goes back a long time, because I believe it was back in the late 60s when I first arrived in Port Hope that I got to see The Christmas Story for the first time. But it wasn't until probably in the 70s when I first was involved with the story performance.
So you began as a spectator, and then you became one of the players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you've been, as I said at the beginning, you've been involved in a couple of different aspects of this. You've been on the stage as well as being in the choir. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. At the beginning, I was just on the stage, and then when I retired, then I also helped out with choir. So I got both ends of it, and it was great to be able to see the performance from the pews again, because of course when we're on stage everything's blacked out and we're not seeing the audience.
Right. I wonder, you must have so many memories of The Christmas Story over the years. I wonder if you might be able to share a few of those with us.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is our dear Georgiana, who always set the tone for our rehearsals, reminding us that we were in a church, and as such we needed to be quiet, with no horsing around and absolutely no gum chewing.
Certain rules cannot be broken. Now,
yes.
you played the role of Simeon for a number of years. Is that right?
I did. Yes, I first started out as Zacharias, and I'm not sure who I replaced at that time, but Simeon had been Ken Mills. And then after Ken Mills passed away, I was asked if I would do the role of Simeon. And I did that for a number of years, for sure. And it was so wonderful to be able to play that role and to be able to hold the baby Jesus in my arms and lip sync the Nunc Dimittis, and while Keith sang it.
Lord,
And
now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of
it was
all
just
people.
just great.
Simeon has one of the most memorable costumes in the production, and I know that there's a story that goes along with that.
I know when Bishop Reed passed away, Father John Reed said that they'd like to donate his vestments to St. John's Church, and perhaps we could use them in the Christmas story. So then some of the ladies went ahead and made me a new hat to go with the vestments. And so I wore that for several years, and it's still being worn. And the last time we did it, I believe. Bishop
Reed's vestments are still being put to good use in a way that I know would please him very much, having a very fond regard, particularly for ministry with children and young people, that being one of his great legacies. What is your favorite part of the production, your favorite scene?
Well, as I said, when I first saw the Christmas story way back in the 60s, I was mesmerized by the three kings, the way they royally walked down the aisle and then back up the sides. But once I got into the story and was at the other side of looking things, I think the most touching part was when we all gathered at the very final ending of the story, and it got very quiet, and you got rather emotional, because I guess we had worked so hard and long to prepare for it, and then all of a sudden it seemed like it was coming to an end, and I used to think, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to be a little bit weepy here, but used to get through it, but it's still a fond memory for sure.
It must be that in the long history of the St. John's Christmas story, there have been some memorable mishaps during the production. I wonder if you could tell us about one of those that you remember.
Oh, I certainly do. A few years ago, Marion thought that Treasure Trove had closed for the year because that's where we always did our makeup and got the cast ready for the show. So she took some of her shepherd's headdresses down to a table downstairs, and Gary came in the next day and thought that they were something that should be going for the diabetes. So he bagged them up and took them out to the shed. Now, you can just imagine the excitement that caused when poor Marion discovered all her headpieces had disappeared, and she had to replace them in short order. But of course she did, and the show went on without a hitch.
Oh my, one of those things. I'm laughing, I'm going to be in trouble for laughing, but probably one of those things that was funnier in retrospect than when it was actually going on. Do you have any parting thoughts or things you want to share?
Well, I just have one last thing that I would like to say, and that is, every time I think of the Christmas story, I think of what it reminds me of, how we were able to mix the very young with those not so young, and work as a team to share with the community this wonderful story that so many have seen repeatedly over the years. So I just want to say thank you, St. John's.
That's marvelous.